and welcome to this video documentary. My name is Dorothy and today we are going to be looking at the psychological and socio-cultural factors that affect sports participation. What are those barriers that hinder and stop people from different ethnic groups, from different social backgrounds, gender? We're going to look at all those different areas and what are the barriers that are hindering people from participating in sport and exercise, and how we may overcome and break those barriers, and also looking at how they have been broken, because there's been lots of breakthroughs in these areas over the years and the decades. But let's get into looking at some of the research. Okay, so when we're looking at psychological factors that impact upon sports and exercise participation, Gill and Williams put it like this. They say, sport and exercise psychology is the scientific study of people and their behaviours in sport and exercise. And by socio-cultural factors that affect sports participation, we mean the social factors, the cultural factors. We will take a step-by-step look at them individually. However, let's keep in mind that certainly there is a connection between some of these factors. Most of the time, they're a combination of social-cultural factors that cause a barrier to sports participation. And as we try to understand these, we can then look at the strategies to overcome them. Okay, so we're going to look at age and gender, because they very often include or exclude people. Figures from Sport England that we should be able to see right now on the screen show that before the lockdown there was a steady increase in male and females becoming more active, yet still a divide. This should not be the case, and all sport and exercise types should be for all to try, and by trying them then decide if they enjoy them enough to pursue them. Yet when we look back in history, we see the huge barrier that has been slowly chipped away at, yet it still exists, and it's been passed through generations. The vast majority of sport began with male participation only. For example, prior to 1870, sports for women existed in the form of play activities that were recreational rather than competitive, and informal without rules. The emphasis was on physical activity, and we're going to see how that has progressed as we move through. The train of thought back in the day was that women were not supposed to jump around and play sport or get sweaty. And certainly over the years, the number of women taking part in sport has increased significantly. Yet, as identified in the article by Alison Higgins and Shirley Randall, girls who aspire to participate in sport have less exposure to female role models. Now there's a thing when we think about female role models in sport. You know, the young men growing up, they see the footballers, the professionals, they see them on the adverts, the certain sports companies tend to use them to promote their products, the basketball players, you know, depending on where you are in the world and the national sport of that country. But certainly in the UK, it tends to lean towards football being the predominant country sport. And these young boys, they grow up through school, they see these men getting promoted, getting celebrated, but where are the role models for the young girls growing up, and where do they look and see the female footballer maybe on the screen? And although those barriers are breaking right now, and we are beginning to see the female sports figures being promoted and used a little bit in the media has such a huge influence over these things, and this is what we want to see more and more, so that girls see themselves, oh, that could be me, or they just feel inspired to take part in some kind of sport and get active. The media has a great influence on the general public, and this became evident with the introduction of television and sport being televised. As noted by the Immortals of British Sport website, no social factor affected sport more than the growth in households having access to television, which became more common in the 1960s. And you know, we see those images now, which a couple of decades back you would not have seen, of the England ladies holding up their cup and their trophies and celebrating at a professional level. So those are some of the barriers that we are seeing, and those good influences and role models breaking through to break that divide between male and female participation. And then we'll move on to looking at disability and social support. And while on that subject, it leads us to removing the barriers of disability. What we see as normal behaviour can cause exclusion or inclusion. For example, according to Agen, the theory states that attitude toward behaviour, subjective norms and perceived behavioural control together shape an individual's behavioural intentions and behaviours. We become controlled into what we think is normal. We become controlled into what we think is normal. And if people have not previously seen people with a disability taking part in sport, then they may believe it's not normal. And without social support to encourage and assist, then someone who has a disability could feel very left out and excluded, and it should not be the case. Social support has been found to affect performance, even in early research collected in 1889 by Norman Triplett from a study of social influence and performance, which observed that cyclists seem more motivated to perform better with social influence. He found, as predicted, that participants did better while performing in pairs. Now, when we talk about disabilities, we also need to remember that gyms, health clubs, parks, youth clubs, swimming facilities, tennis courts, whatever the activities are, we need to make sure that these places are adapted and accessible to people with a disability, that they can feel comfortable to go along and take part and know that there is plenty of things that they will be able to do. So there needs to be some special adaptations. The next factor we're going to look at is income and occupation. While looking at the barriers to sport and exercise participation, finances and occupation, of course, have a big effect. Most leisure centres, gym and health clubs encourage membership only, which means a monthly fee of anything from maybe a minimum of £20 to £60 plus every month, which can seem an extra bill you can do without, on top of all the other monthly expenses. Even pay-as-you-go classes begin at around £5 per class. When considering the cost of exercise and sports clubs, many feel the fees exclude them because of the financial barrier, the surplus, and they feel that taking part in sport is maybe not essential, so they put it towards what they class as their essentials. The barrier of finance can be overcome via schemes that encourage us to use outdoor activities and parks, and even sessions such as the NHS Live Well site. They have exercise sessions that we can do at home. Now, depending on the occupation that a person does, the hours they work can affect the participation in sport and exercise. Some work shifts and long hours, while some have very physical jobs, and because of that they don't see a need for exercise. However, when working in a physical job, the element of fun and friendship that can be included as a healthy social life is very important. So physical activity, playing some kind of sport, it has that element of fun and friendship, as well as being a healthy pastime, a healthy social life. As Tara Scanlon took time to do research in the topic of positive and negative emotions relating to sport and exercise, she defined enjoyment as a positive affect response to the sport experience that reflects generalized feelings such as pleasure, liking, and fun. Now, we also have some figures that we should be able to see on the screen there that back up the social and friendship aspects, and these figures are from Sport England, and they show the data that has been collected of people who take part in sport and exercise, and they are less likely to feel lonely. So we're looking again at how, yes, maybe people have a physical job and they think, okay, I'm active at work, so I don't necessarily need to be active in my leisure. But sport is a healthy pastime and it has a social aspect. Now, it may well be that work time does affect leisure time, and the choices people make depend on how physically active the person is at work. Hence, as also mentioned by Del Ducati, mentioned earlier, many individuals who were otherwise categorized as inactive in fact met recommendations for physical activity when data on transport physical activity were included, as opposed to when only leisure time physical activity was counted. It is reasonable to assume that people of lower socio-economic status have less surplus energy to be physically active during their leisure time because of the physical strain of their work. Moreover, there is reason to believe that people of higher socio-economic status are more active in their leisure time out of necessity because they are less physically active at work, and not merely because of their ability to finance their activities. That it's not necessarily the financial aspect, but the balance. So we'll move on now quickly and have a look at education and neighbourhood. As with much of the push for change over the last 20 to 30 years, there has been a push for equal opportunities, and this should apply to sport and exercise. But again, participants of the population often seem to be lacking in access to some of the different sporting and exercise opportunities that are available throughout the country. This can come down to funding in the educational setting, or simply due to not feeling safe enough to go out in the local neighbourhood at certain times to take exercise. Now, ethnicity and family interaction also play a big part in sports participation, whether people do take part or not. And there are figures again from Sport England in 2020 that shows that there's still quite a large gap in the participation between ethnic groups. Cultures and traditions people hold and are brought up in are different around the world. Family values and religious beliefs may also play a part in how people conduct themselves in public places. Some beliefs and cultures would not permit a woman to wear certain types of clothes that are seen as the normal for sport or exercise. Now, self-confidence or the lack of it, self-efficacy or the lack of it, physical self-perception, motivation, self-esteem. What is self-efficacy? People's judgment of their capabilities to organize and execute courses of action to attain designated types of performance. Bandura said this in 1986. Physical self-perception. A person's view of herself or himself, their mental and physical attributes that constitute their self, how they see their self. And motivation. Low levels of motivation can also be due to a lack of and combination of things. Motivation can be a positive, or it can be low motivation and a negative. Low levels of motivation are often a combination of things, such as not understanding the benefit, lacking the confidence to get started, maybe not having any encouragement from friends or family. Self-esteem. It's the individual's subjective evaluation of their own self-worth, your belief about yourself. Self-perception. Fox said in 1997, the amount of self-perception one has may be significant to the amount of self-esteem that an individual experiences. How do we break these psychological barriers and social-cultural factors? By looking into the behind the scenes of how these barriers were broken in history may also be helpful to see how future barriers of similar kinds can be overcome, such as our social economic status. Figures show that those who have higher income take part in more sports and leisure time activities. So with the recent news that COVID-19 can possibly affect people who are overweight in a more negative way than people who are not, we need to make sure that the barriers to participation in sport and exercise are overcome, and that there are more available schemes to encourage participation for everyone. The thought of wearing tight or revealing clothes for some is horrifying. So the answer is simple. Unless it's dangerous, let people wear what they feel comfortable in. History shows it works. We can do away with the stereotypical leotards. We did it. Everyone used to think you had to wear a leotard to go to an exercise class. Stereotypical. Back in the day when aerobic classes first hit the scene. Yet now many wear long baggy t-shirts and enjoy the class just as much or maybe more. So we've mentioned about breaking barriers, but let's also refresh and also add in a few others. There's schemes like This Girl Can. It's been around for 4 or 5 years now. It's a popular scheme. It is to encourage girls, women into exercise. The scheme also uses role models from the female world of sport to advertise. It's a great scheme, and there's others like it. We have the Couch to 5K. We have NHS Live Well, which has a website and it has all free workouts on there that can be done at home and outdoors. Education, let's educate, let's make sure that it's promoted in the government, healthy living and the reasons behind it, and the stereotyping be removed. Let's make adverts more motivational. Government campaigns, using different cultures, people from different backgrounds and cultures as role models in sport. Sport on TV, sporting events, if they are free, it would be a wonderful thing to make sport free on TV, because then it's more accessible to people. There's no financial barrier that you have to pay to watch sport on TV, and watching sport will encourage people to take part in sport. it motivates. You see others doing it, you feel like taking part. It's all part of that psychological process that stirs people up inside, to put it simply, and they feel motivated to do it too. Now we can also use models of stages of change to look at people's behavior and where they are at. There are many different ways of making an evaluation of the psychological factors of self-confidence, self-esteem. There's many different ways to evaluate where a person is, and then use models such as the trans-theological model of the stages of change, and let's move them through there. See if they're ready to take part in some form of physical activity. And if they're not, then at least we can know which area we need to work on, whether it is education, whether it's motivation, so people can understand or be motivated to take part in exercise. And then we also have Maslow's hierarchy of needs to sport. People have needs. I hope you can see on the screen there that it is good that we try and meet the needs of people. A need to belong. We all need to feel like we belong. So let's make people feel inclusive, that psychological needs are met, that people's self-esteem is boosted. I hope that this has been informative, and although we have only just scratched the surface, this is a very large topic, and for today we will leave it there. Thank you for watching.